Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Investing Explained. Here's today's question. If someone starts to feel adventurous or they just can't avoid the temptation that auction prices often present, why might they need to think twice about buying properties at an auction? What stopped you?
Auctions are interesting because you're trying to figure out where can I go to get a deal? Where can I go to get like a good opportunity that not many people are able to get to or what have you. We've actually never bought a property at a physical auction or a physical, they say the court steps. People envision all being on the steps. You're actually not on the steps. You're inside a building, but I don't know why people have said that like that, like you envision all kind of hanging out on the steps. But we've actually bought a couple of properties from I forget it was Hubzu or one of the auction sites, websites, not so much a physical one. And the biggest challenge to work through is what you don't know about the property, really. And you normally can't get into the property unless you break in. And I don't really encourage people to illegally break into properties. I mean, there are people who do that, but I'm not really that big of a fan of breaking the law. It's not a good thing. So you have these assets that you know enough on what the website or at least the physical going to an auction will tell you, but it's intense, right? You're trying to make a decision quickly. You don't have tons of time, right? And if we're all under the gun to make decisions, we see other people bidding, it's like a whole emotional, kind of like the opposite of what you should do in business. And so we did pull the trigger for a property online because we knew the market really well. Number one, if the address comes up and you don't know that area really well, meaning like you can visualize that street and in a second, it's a good deal. That's number one. You got to know the area, in my opinion, if you're going to move quickly on in that type of bidding or what have you. But the second issue is then the property. What liens are against that property? What title issues are with that property? I mean, you could be getting into something that costs a lot more money to get out. So you need to be so conservative with your numbers, like worst case scenario, like the worst case scenario. And that's kind of how we went into it, is that we knew the property, I think, was worth about 200 grand fixed up. And we were like, okay, we're not going to exceed 50 grand. So there can be nothing. I mean, it's a 1,400 square foot house. So it's like, what kind of liens? What's the worst case scenario? I mean, that would be really bad if we went into that property with that type of cushion, in our opinion, in an area that we knew, and we knew what kind of rehab it needed. So we took that risk. But that wasn't our first property either. That's the other thing. I don't know if an auction property should be someone's first property. Unless you have an experienced investor going to that auction and you could be a part owner of that or a fly on the wall or help that person in some way. That might be a good strategy. Would you want to because then you got to put it all up too. A lot of those processes that you have to put within 30 days, you have to pay it in full, cash, not literally. In the first year, you're thinking you have to bring all this money to the thing. And that's weird because you're walking around with a lot of cash. But that's not necessarily it. You bring cashier's checks and I'm like a moron, but that's what I thought at first when we were getting going. So yeah, bottom line, I think is really, really important to do your homework on the area. And then also as much as you can, that's why building relationships with title companies helps. Really having a great title company you work with that help you and you throw a lot of business to, and they can help you and say, okay, I'm looking at this property and can do those kinds of things too. We've done that where we get a quick title search on a property, obviously, before we make an offer. But yeah, I don't know if I'd make that my first property or my first deal because there are a lot of caution. There's a lot of risk that goes into it, but you also can get some really good deals.
Yeah, I haven't done an auction deal yet myself, but when you look at some of the prices, it starts to be tempting. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I'm sure people see those numbers and they're like, they start to get really tempted. And so I wanted to chat about that really quick.
The other thing I would recommend though, is that what we also ended up doing was there was a couple wholesalers that ended up going to the physical auctions every Wednesday. I think it was every Wednesday. They usually have them weekly. The people know them. They show up. It's like their gig, right? This is what they do. These are the kind of people that you want to connect with because it's a whole process you got to study. You can study that process if you have the time on your hands. If you don't have the time and you have the money or you have little time, you want to start to build relationships with those wholesalers because they're looking for people like you to sell those to. Again, wholesalers are not all created equal. There's some that are wonderful. We've worked with a bunch, and there's other ones that psychotic what they'll charge you. I mean, it's like highway robbery. So you want to find those people that are going to be fair, but also that are the ones studying and going to these, and they should rightfully get paid for that. I mean, everyone deserves to get paid for the time and energy. That was the other thing that we did. We kind of just stopped going. We're like, this doesn't make any sense that we're going to these. let's team up with some of the wholesalers that are. And so we pay a little more, pay $5,000 more. That made more sense to us than having to do it all yourself, because it's a whole process in and of itself, whole culture. Same people go every week to most of these.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you need to just focus on what you're good at, and you can't do everything. And so sometimes you're going to give up a little bit, but you gain a lot more on the other side. So I think that was probably smart for you guys. That's all for this episode of Real Estate Investing Explained. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to get even more free content.